Good afternoon, members. Substantive items for us today begin with a briefing by the Northern Ireland Council for Ethnic Minorities on Roma integration. We have officials on progress on the sexual orientation strategy, also officials on the latest with regard to the Social Investment Fund, and we'll also be considering draft subordinate legislation in relation to the salary of the Northern Ireland Ombudsman. And finally, we will be asked to consider terms of reference for our own inquiry into the Barroso Task Force. To note, we were to have been briefed by officials on age discrimination legislation in relation to goods, facilities and services. However, you'll note at page 3 of table papers, there's a letter from the Department advising that this issue is still under consideration. Officials are discussing potential implications of GFS legislation with other departments, and therefore the Department wishes to defer until the end of April. Any apologies or late arrivals?
Alex will be in shortly.
Okay, thank you. Members, I'd like to take a couple of minutes now to bring you up to date on the ongoing issue of liaison between ourselves and the Department. The Clerk, Deputy Chair and I met with the Head of the Civil Service yesterday morning to discuss. Previously I have had informal discussions with Special Advisors, Junior Ministers and indeed the Principal Ministers. Yesterday's meeting was within the context of our statutory responsibility as per the 1998 Northern Ireland Act, the Belfast Agreement, and also the current protocols which govern timescales for interaction between committees and departments. Within that context, we gave the Head of the Civil Service a paper, which again is in your table pack beginning at page 4. And on the first page of that, we highlighted issues that have arisen since summer recess with regard to briefings that have either been cancelled or rescheduled. So on the 11th of September, a briefing on TBUC, Together Building a United Community, was cancelled the Friday before the meeting. And on the same day, a civil contingency briefing was cancelled. That was done a week before. The meeting of the 9th of October, we requested officials respond following our briefings from the Victims Commissioner and the Victims Service, but were advised that couldn't happen until the 23rd of October. The meeting of the 16th of October, a briefing on civil contingencies was cancelled as the issue is still apparently under consideration. 26th of October, we were advised that the Programme for Government briefing would need to be rescheduled. If you remember, we cancelled our formal meeting and visited Fort Spring instead. Same meeting, a response received to request for a briefing on the Social Investment Fund advised us officials were not in a position to brief. Then the 13th of November, a response to our request for a briefing on victims and survivors advised us that that could not happen until December. On the 4th of December, a briefing on the Programme for Government was cancelled without information. A response to our request for a briefing on the sexual orientation strategy was that it was still under consideration and no briefing therefore could be offered. And a response to our request for a briefing on PEDU on flooding advised that that review was still under consideration. On the 11th of December, a request for a briefing by junior ministers for that day on victims' issues was responded to with a note saying the ministers would be unavailable until late January. Then on the 15th of January, we received a letter from the Department asking to reschedule a briefing on TBUC until the 5th of February. Our meeting on the 29th of January, a briefing on the budget was postponed. A briefing on gender equality strategy was rescheduled at our request because of the lateness of papers, which were received at 3:09 the previous afternoon. On the 5th of February, a briefing on historical abuse scoping paper was postponed as options we were told were still under consideration. We received that advice at 4 p.m. on the Tuesday afternoon. And finally, last week, 12th of February, a request for a briefing by ministers on the Maes-Long-Kesh site was declined as it is still under consideration. And a briefing on racial equality strategy was cancelled by letter at 3:30 on the Tuesday afternoon. On the second page, we deal with late papers since September. 18th of September's meeting, DSC, no papers were provided. 29th of September, TBUC, no papers were provided. 2nd of October, Bright Start papers were received the afternoon before the meeting. 9th of October, a legislative consent motion, papers received 1 day before the meeting. 23rd of October, EU briefing, papers were tabled, received late the afternoon before the meeting. Same meeting, victims and survivors, we had tabled papers late the afternoon before. 27th of November meeting, we had no briefing papers for our engagement with the junior ministers. 4th of December, a SIF briefing, no papers. 11th of December, papers tabled for the victims and survivors. And on January monitoring, the papers were received on the morning of the meeting. 22nd of January, junior ministers on victims' issues, the papers were received that morning. 5th of February, TBUC, no papers were received. 12th of February, gender equality, briefing papers received on the Tuesday afternoon. And on the regeneration of sites, papers were received on the Tuesday morning. And then 19th of February, today, GFS, no briefing paper, and indeed no session. Sexual orientation strategy, briefing paper received 5 p.m. Friday, and Social Investment Fund, no briefing paper. On page 3, at the bottom of page 3, there are 4 issues where we were not advised as per protocols on delivering social change, children and young people, good relations indicators consultation, active ageing strategy, and programme for government. And on the final page, members, we turn to outstanding issues, and we've gone a little bit further back since the 30th of November 2012. 67 items of correspondence to departments requesting a written response. 7 responses are not yet in or are not due. Of the remaining 60, 14 are outstanding. So out of the 67 items, 7 only were received within the agreed timescale of 10 working days. The average response time was 58.8 working days, roughly 12 weeks, and the longest response was 299 working days overdue. So members, that's 17 briefings, 17 papers, 4 consultations, and 60 items of correspondence in violation of the protocols. Dr. McKibben took the paper away, he said it was helpful. The paper was also forwarded to the chairperson's liaison group and raised under AOB at their meeting yesterday. They have agreed to ask the other statutory committees to provide a similar analysis so that we have this evidence base and also can benchmark it against performance between other departments and their statutory committees. Dr. McKibben has undertaken to speak to OFMdFM. He made the point that because of the ongoing leaders' meetings, sometimes his regular session with the principals has to be postponed. So we agreed that rather than try to force him to come to committee when he may not have the right answers next week, that we should leave it until this day fortnight. So Dr. McKibben is due to appear before committee on the 5th of March. Any comments or content to note? Noted. Okay. So next, members, page 5 is a copy of the committee's current invitations. Then if we go on to the draft minutes of our meeting of the 12th of February, that begins at page 7. Are we content to agree the draft minutes? Agreed. Here, matters arising begin at page 15, where you'll find a response from the department providing further information on a number of issues raised following the briefing from junior ministers on the 22nd of January. We're advised the programme board has met 6 times, that it provides information on stakeholders that junior ministers have consulted, and also information on the processes for Scheme 6. We're also advised that it will be in a better position to make cost comparisons between the Victims and Survivors Service and the old Community Relations Council and Memorial Fund operations following the VSS's first full year in operation, which is 2013-14. And the response also comments on improvements that have been made to the Victims and Survivors Services website. I hope members are content with the information provided.
Chair, generally content in relation to the fourth question as to the running costs. I thought they would have given us some indication, but I suppose it's only 5 or 6 weeks to the end of the financial year. So
Okay. There's another issue I would like to raise, but I have to say it's anecdotal and it's only come from one source. But I understand that the review of the VSS has been completed. But I have also been told that the assessments in the meantime are not taking place, and that groups are being allowed to effectively self-assess their own members. And that, I think, should give us concern over governance issues. If it is true, now the clerk spoke to VSS, and the answer doesn't seem to be particularly clear, is it?
Just what they had mentioned, that the assessments have been suspended and they're operating through a gateway process with the...
Is the gate open or closed?
Has anybody heard?
Well, I mean, did the ministers or somebody told us at that end of the table that the assessments were suspended? In the meantime, I can't remember exactly who it was, whether it was the ministers or VSS. It must be on the record someplace.
Junior ministers.
Junior ministers told us that?
Yes. Was this idea that a group leader might be filling out forms on behalf of members?
Surely it still have to go through the system, do they not?
I think there is some sort of process there before the VSS became involved.
Deputy Chair?
Chair, I think it might be helpful to get clarification. I think Jimmy is right in terms of there being a formal notification of suspension of assessments. I think the motivation for that was because the assessments had been so problematic that they needed to suspend them to review them. But the question that you raise in terms of what is happening in the meantime, I think is a valid one that they should have to provide information on. It would be interesting as well, Chair, to get an outline of the process in terms of publication of the outcome of the review, recommendations in the near future as well.
Jimmy?
Lead Chair, I think some of the suspension came about as part of some of the reasonably serious issues that we raised from the committee here. So, but you would expect some sort of an interim process to be in place.
Yeah. I've no difficulty with the suspension, Jimmy. I think you're right, and you certainly pushed hard to highlight the inadequacies. I'm just a little bit concerned that there is a process in play which isn't strictly and robustly governed. But anyway, okay, we'll pursue that. Members, page 21 of your packs, a response from the Department to the Committee's request for further information on the Social Investment Fund, following the briefing that we had on the 5th of December, but of course we have a briefing later today on the announcement of funding that was made in the Chamber of Monday of last week. Outstanding issues is next. Page 25 is a list of outstanding issues. I'll pause for comment if anybody so wishes. If not, the correspondence. At page 28, a memo from the Committee for Finance and Personnel seeking views on the NIAO report on sickness absence in the public sector. For information, OFMdFM's actual days lost in 2011-12 is 8.7 days compared to a civil service average of 10.1. Next, page 29, further memo from the Committee for Finance and Personnel, providing a briefing paper from DFP setting out their draft estimate, showing the detail of current and capital expenditure and reconciliation to the net cash requirement. And the Finance Committee agreed it may be helpful to circulate this paper as a potential model for other departments to follow in future in terms of their briefing arrangements for committees at a departmental level. If you recall, we tabled this last week and we agreed we'd bring it back, having allowed time for consideration. So, do members think this is a model we would like adopted for our engagement with the department in this matter?
Why not?
Yeah.
It'll be useful, Chair, helpful. Breathing.
Yes. Okay. I'll take that as a yes. Okay, thank you very much. Page 40, correspondence from the junior ministers. They give us an overview of December's meeting of the Joint Ministerial Committee on Europe. Moving on to tabled items, page 9, with correspondence from the Department advising the launch of the consultation on the active ageing strategy will be this Friday. The venue is Belfast City Hall. It's 12:30 p.m. and it will be part of the Pensioners Parliament event at the City Hall. Members are invited. Could you please notify the committee office if you're intending to attend? Next, members, it's item 6, which is a briefing from the Northern Ireland Council for Ethnic Minorities on integration of the Roma. And you'll recall this is one of our EU priorities, or was, for 2013. In September last, the committee considered a UK explanatory memorandum on a European Council proposal on effective Roma integration measures in the member state. The aim was to strengthen the political commitment of member states to advancing Roma integration and speed up the implementation of national Roma integration strategies or integrated sets of policy measures for Roma inclusion. Following correspondence with the Department advised, quote, decided not to develop a specific Roma integration strategy. Ministers considered it to be more appropriate to deal with the issues raised by Roma and Irish travellers and other groups within the context of the revamped racial equality strategy. At page 46 of your pack, members, is the clerk's brief on the issue. Page 48 onwards is a copy of a briefing paper provided by NICEB. And finally, at page 55 is a copy of the UK's EM, and from page 59, copies of correspondence with the Department. So we welcome to the committee Patrick Yu and Mark Donoghue. Gentlemen, you're very welcome. Patrick, can you make some opening remarks, please?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you, the committee invited us to give the briefing about our view on the Roma integration. First of all, today I also bring with another colleague, Mark Donoghue. Mark is also a traveller by himself, and I think if you look at the definition of Roma, it is European context. You're talking about different umbrella group of nomadic way of life, including Roma, Gypsy, traveller, Sinti, and others. So I think we need to look at that context. And I think another context is about over the last 10 years, after the PSI working group on the traveller community, there's huge report coming out and a lot of strategy being developed and implemented. But 15 years on, what's the impact? So that's why I bring with Mark today. You can share the experience. Even though we have a good strategy, still go nowhere. There's not much change over that 20-year period. So maybe I ask Mark to introduce yourself.
Mark Donoghue. I'm currently Secretary of the newly formed Traveller and Gypsy Network, Northern Ireland. And again, the reason why this organisation has been set up is because the lack of a clear strategy towards the rights of travellers in terms of education, accommodation, health inequalities and so on. As Patrick outlined, that there has been a strategy in the past, which there was 33 recommendations of the PSI promoting social inclusion report from the target and social need. But those recommendations weren't carried out, they weren't taken seriously, and travellers are still in the same situation now as we have been in for 2 to 3 decades, because again we're in the same situation in terms of lack of employment opportunities, educational attainment.
Okay, I think I know that you have a very tight timetable today, so I just very brief about my presentation. You already get my paper. I just go straight to the page 2 about scope the issue. And I think I already mentioned the first thing is about the definition of Roma. It is a bigger umbrella term. And we also looking at the information provided by the department. I think we a little bit skeptical about the numbers issue, because the number is not static. It is dynamic. It is depends on, two factors, whether we have the Roma. I think Roma, when we talk about Roma, we always assume they are all coming from Romania, which is untrue, which is not, the facts. You have, huge Roma population across Europe. I think it's more than 11 million, people from different central states of Europe. So now I think what the department said more about those Roma living in South Belfast in the Holy Land area. And you also now, recently, you have, new group from Hungary now living in East Belfast. In our work, we have a regional office in Lurgan, in Craven, but based in Lurgan. So we dealt with, Roma cases. So there's now a small Roma community from Romania being, built up. So that's why it is not, static, as we said. But of course, I recite, the chairs at the beginning about the purpose of the Commission's recommendation of, the suggestion. I think the purpose is very clear-cut, how we, have the political commitment, to advancing the integration. In relation to the OFM arguing, there's no evidence Roma are disadvantaged if we don't have the strategy. I don't need to say anything. I think Mark already stayed very clear-cut, even though if you have a strategy, it still, hasn't implemented very much. But one thing, is striking me, one of the arguments from the official is they lump all the Roma as a group of European Union's migrants. Now, yes, to some extent they are under, the same right freedom of person to come to UK seeking for a job. In one sense, they are, the EU migrant. But at the same time, you're also looking at their vulnerability. That's why, at the European Commission, the Roma integration project has been done more than a decade ago because they still haven't resolved the problem. That's why they put it, I think if you see this is a political commitment, that's why they desperately ask the member state to advancing, that framework and action plan. This is not new, nothing new. And I think if you look at the UK government's role in the whole thing, UK government is on the working group, and they know very well about what's going on. This is exactly what they discuss, and then this is, agreed by member state before they can put it as, the decision. The last thing I try to also mention about the race strategy. I think there's no doubt, I agree, we should have a revamped race strategy. But when and where? I've been in this committee for quite a number of times over the years. We're waiting for 4 years now. If you remember well, in 2007, when the Stormont government re-established again, then there was a motion debate in the chamber in July 2007. All parties at that time unanimously support the racial equality strategy, but strongly criticized about the implementation of strategy through the action plan. And I think exactly the same problem now facing. And I think part of the issue why the traveler issue could not be solved, because we don't have any strategic thinking, we don't have any general approach. A lot of issues are interdepartmental. It is not only one department could resolve those issues and problems. So I would like to see these should be in the new revamped race strategy. I also encourage, because this is the only strategy will benefit for all ethnic minority, whether you're a newcomer, settled ethnic minority, or others, because this is only one to promote the wider diversity in Northern Ireland. And we also encourage this committee to sponsoring a motion debate when the race strategy coming out for consultation. I think it's very important to put it into the political agenda, just like in 2007. So I think for that reason, I more or less conclude, we support the Commission's proposal. It is the tiny one. We need to do it quick. And I also suggest we understood it is now difficult for the department to put another strategy on traveler, Roma, and Gypsy. What I suggest to do is once when the race strategy coming out, You already have the framework. Based on that framework, to develop, the other vulnerable group, including Roma, Gypsy, and Traveller. So I just stop here and then see any question from the committee members.
Okay, Patrick and Mark, thank you both very much for your presentations. Actually, I think, given we're discussing promoting and protecting diversity, it would be remiss if we didn't, at this point, as a committee, condemn the racial abuse on social media against Anna Lowe, MLA, just to put that on record, and I take it there are no dissenting voices around the table. Patrick, first of all, can I ask, how do you have solid evidence of numbers? Because you mentioned, for example, Hungarians coming into East Belfast. How do you find out?
This is from the community as well. Sometimes the people they're asking for help. So how the through different casework, also going to our office as well as from other link.
Right. So you wouldn't be told in advance that there was a group coming from, say, continental Europe who were intending to settle, or
no, we don't know. I think it's only by the people when they arrive, when they have problem, then they will come to help, and you can identify. In most cases, we bring your attention about the Roma background. Then we will ask, do you have any other people have the same problem or issue? Because we don't want just deal with one single cases. Quite a lot of similar issue affect the rest of them.
Mm-hmm. Could that information be trapped in a more effective or efficient way, do you think?
I think at the moment it's very difficult. Now you see the census figure. They do very interesting this time. There are, I think, 50 or 60 people identify themselves as Roma, very precisely. Under the nationality question as well, others, they put others. Then 60 people, they identify themselves as Roma. Other than that, we only have those by nationality from different EU member states. So it is at the moment is extremely difficult to find a number. Now I know that there are different projects now in place, to mainly to work in the South Belfast or the Holy Land area. You have the Belfast City Council, sponsoring the tension monitoring project, also working in conjunction with, I think they also get the funding from OFMdFM, so they have one full-time staff to work with them. You also have the Belfast Health Trust. They also fund a part-time health worker to link, the access to the healthcare services. They might have, general by number in that area. That is only information you could get. East Belfast, there's nothing has been provided. The same as, in Mid-Ulster. But as I said, this is only, those cases we come across. That's how we know there are a group of these people living and working in that local area. Okay. Precisely, you need, to get a lot of information close from, different departments.
Okay. Mark, can I just ask a question on terminology? Because I see your title within the Northern Ireland Council for Ethnic Minorities is Traveller, Gypsy and Roma Network. The middle descriptor was one I thought we kind of shied away from.
Gypsy.
Yeah.
No, that's actually quite a positive term. If you might know of the Gypsy Council in Britain, which is the largest Romani Gypsy organisation in Britain. So it's a very positive, and it's the Romani Gypsy population here aren't really recognised when it comes against the Irish traveller population. So hence the putting the term Gypsy into the network, because they tend to be forgot about.
Yeah, I think it's quite widely used in GB.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But over in Northern Ireland, for some reason, it seems to become
it's like
pejorative.
when the Irish traveller, when the All-Ireland Traveller Health Study, I don't know if you're aware of the All-Ireland Traveller Health Study, which has just been published, Romani Gypsies have been excluded from that, who've been established. The Romani Gypsy population have been here for around about 200 years, including my extended family, and they've been excluded from traveller rights organisations. So
why is that?
Again, because the Irish travellers are the majority amongst the nomadic group, and they tend to be sort of in the background. So that's why this traveller network has been formed to include Irish travellers and Romani Gypsies.
So there are tensions.
No, not tensions. It's just they sort of lumped in the same because there's a whole raft of British gypsies, Irish gypsies. Well, we'll not go into that. So, it's,
Okay. But the needs would be common.
the needs are fairly similar in terms of treatment as well, in terms of discrimination, health inequality. So.
Okay. The last racial equality strategy is long gone. What's the impact, practically, of not having a current strategy?
Well, the impact is quite simple. There's no action plan being implemented. Because suppose one of under the last one, each department and the next step agency, they must implement the action plan to cut across the 6 aims of the race strategy. Because of the whole thing gone, I think it's all related with the framework document at that time. Everything being frozen as a result because race relations subsumed to the bigger good relation. So that's why under the CSI, then there is a gap, to defrost, the race strategy. That's how, we start the process. Now what we call the revamped racial equality strategy.
And what discussions have you had with the department about bringing on a strategy?
Well, we would like, to see, based on the debate in the Assembly in 2007, I think all the solution already there. But the issue is whether the department take on board all these, criticism by, various parties. I think, as I said, the two main things, one is joint-up approach. One is, it should be a more strategic thinking about, action. Because you can't just copy and paste of the function of your department has an action plan. So you have, 30, 40 action in one department. How you prioritize these things? Do you have resources?
Would it be fair to summarise what Patrick is saying? When you come up to Stormont and you go to the executive, you get very warm words. Everybody says, oh yes, this is a great idea, we must do this, we're working on it. But in your world, nothing ever actually happens.
For us, it is about implementation. If you like to see the impact, there must be a benchmark process about what, the state of the situation now, and also, 5 years on after the implementation of the strategy, what will be the impact? That's why we would like to see the new race strategy should be in high level of strategic action rather than just an ordinary, function of the department. And of course, this strategic action should be joined up from other departments. Travel a good example, like if you try to, improve education, improve, employability, then you need to tackle with, the housing issue. Because housing also impacting on health impacting on, the way to work. So this, are not one single issue can resolve.
Sure. Well, let's open it up to members. Bronwyn McGann.
Okay, thank you, Patrick and Mark, for your presentation. And I'm also a member of the PG on ethnic minorities, so I do have an interest in this issue. Patrick, you mentioned there were strategies under the promoting social inclusion. There was a number of recommendations there, but were never actually implemented. Is that?
I think not all. I am not saying, not. Take for example, like the only one, take it more serious is from Department of Education, especially, the previous and also the current Minister of Education. This is the only one so far at the moment. They still, implement some of those improvements. Take for example, like I attend the event organized by DE last month. They already, launched the new, what we call educational achievement for the traveler. So there's something moving, to improve, that part. But I haven't seen other departments, have similar action. Take for example, like I think just like in the Roma strategy, they focus on 4 major areas: health, education, employment, and also on housing. So you can see, these are the 4 main areas. I haven't seen anything on Dell about their huge unemployment within the traveler. Do they have any special scheme like appendix scheme specific for traveler, or any employability training for them so that they could get access to jobs? The accommodation very slow, and health one, they do a lot of things, mainly through funding project, but I don't see, they have a very, much, a kind of strategy to improving the health, in particular the mortality rate. Now, in the third part of my submission, I highlight all those UN committee over the last 5 years. These are the outstanding issue in relation to Roma, Gypsy, and Traveller about different policy area. So if you put it in the context, we still have a long, long way to go.
Regarding those outstanding issues, have you followed up on those with the respective departments in terms of outstanding recommendations and action points?
We haven't, because I think, as I said in my introduction, NICEM is not specific on the specific one community. I think we only bring this up to the international standard. So that's why a lot of things reflected in Part 3. Because this is the conclusion observation from the last 3 committee we were in the last 3 years. We went to the UN Committee on Racial Discrimination. We also subsequently come to this committee to report, the issue. The second one is, the Economic Social Rights Committee. And then the last one is last year, the Committee on Gender. So these are all the outstanding issues within, the Traveller, Roma, and Gypsy. All departments, they know this because they need to respond to this from the UN Committee.
Jimmy Spratt.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. 2.1 of your document, an issue that I certainly would be very concerned about, and it's quite obvious that some of these street collectors and big issue and what have you are organised. So there's obviously still a gangmaster, is there?
Yes.
Well, in terms of the gangmaster, in terms of exploitation of some of these folks, what are you aware of what the police service of Northern Ireland is doing in relation to exploitation?
Well, I think this is the mixed issue because if you look at the gangmaster legislation, it only applies to the rural area. In the urban area, there's similar power under DEL. So it's a matter of whether DEL they investigate about whether they have that kind of exploitation. It is very difficult for the police unless there are some criminal element there. So that's why it is a little bit complicated. Now, our concern as usual is if these people they could get access to job, then they don't need to rely on those gangmasters. Now, in our advice clinic, we help not more than 10 families in South Belfast mainly at one point. Basically, if you try to help them to find a job, then they will living the gangmaster. So for me, the most effective, just like any other EU migrant, help them to get access to the job is the best way. And also, when they go to the mainstreaming, job, then the interaction between the local and the Roma community will be, increasing. Then it will prevent the kind of segregation. Now, like they're all living in Holy Land because they feed each other. So they are living in, 2 or 3 streets along the Holy Land.
Deputy Chair Chris Little.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for your presentation, gentlemen. The Chair has alluded to the fact that racism remains a prevailing problem in our country, despite the vast majority of people in Northern Ireland wanting this to be a diverse, welcoming place for everyone. And you note that in 2009, there was an incident where I think around 250 Roma were forced to flee Northern Ireland due to racist incidents. And yet we've had no racial equality strategy since 2010 and no action plan since 2010. The European Council is putting pressure on member states to deliver either national Roma integration strategies or policy measures for Roma inclusion. The OFMdFM response to that has been to say that it won't develop a specific Roma integration strategy, but that it would seek to deal with this issue within the context of a revamped racial equality strategy. Can you give the committee your view in relation to that? I think you have mentioned that you would prefer to see a separate strategy for travellers, Gypsy and Roma. Is that the case?
Yes. What I suggest to do is the race equality strategy is the overarching one. So suppose it should cover all groups regardless. But of course, there are some more vulnerable groups. like Roma, Gypsy, traveler, asylum seeker, refugee, these what we call, and also human trafficking, like whether they're women or young children or, young men or young women. So these, what we recall to, the vulnerable group. Now, if you see the Commission's proposal, I think I also highlight in paragraph 2.3, target policy measure. Now, if you look at, the Commission's idea, you have the 4 policy area cut across all those vulnerable groups. What they, looking at, is those, Roma women and children, looking at, those discrimination, those social inclusion, anti-discrimination, that kind of, area. So I think, suppose, the race size should be, have the same effect. But of course, the full implementation is through each department or joint or interdepartmental action plan. So that is, the only way to cut across all those aims. Otherwise, we just have a detached framework document all the time, then the action are detached from, the main objective and aim.
And have you conveyed those ideas to the department, and what's the most recent update you've received from the department with regards to the status of the revamped racial equality strategy?
Well, my understanding, suppose they were before your committee last Wednesday, is it right? It didn't happen. So I think in the all-party group, I think Brian already known last time when she chairing, the meeting, because the official, we asked, about the situation, and at that time, they still don't know whether, when the meeting will be, in place. Our idea has been, conveyed to them through many occasions. We also make a lot of our own, submission to them about our view and how we can, because for us it's quite simple. The executive already agreed with the previous 6 aims. So how we, build upon on that? The main thing is, you need to justify through all those, research, evidence-based thing over the last 10-year period to justify why that 6 aim is still important. Then after we establish that justification, then the next stage is what action should be proposed. So I don't think, because the role of OFMdFM, they are just like a coordinator. They're not the enforcer. If in the individual department they don't implement the action plan, they couldn't do anything, nor, they supply any information to them neither. So what I suggest, is, the action plan, there should be a framework to more or less, pushing each department. They should more, using strategic thinking and general approach. Maybe all the colleagues in this table also remember, they also under the new Section 25 duty or voluntary duty to publish an audit of inequality report and the action plan. So there already something there. For us, it's quite simple. The race strategy should annex all those departmental audit inequality report so that we know each department what are the inequality issues within race on certain groups, so that it will be help them to develop the action plan.
But OFMdFM has an important leadership role in relation to that coordination. So how seriously do you think they're taking that role, given the delays that have been in place in relation to that strategy?
I'm not the department, I can't answer this question. I think, from our perspective, we would like, because we're waiting for more than 4 years. So after 2007, we will debate, and then afterward, we have the CSI, so we thought that, everything will be deflawed, everything will be quick, but still now 2014, so we still haven't get anything coming out yet.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Alex Massey.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Patrick and Mark, for your presentation so far. I do think that we do need to get as early an update on the racial equality strategy as quickly as possible. I'm not actually quite sure where it's sitting at the moment. I know we were to get something back in.
We were to get a briefing last week, but the consultation's still live.
Yeah, so I think we need to get somewhere, because I do agree that you do need an overarching strategy for all of this. In relation to, Patrick, you've referred to the Roma community and families over in South Belfast, and I do think, and my worry actually is that there is a detention monitoring group there is a liaison person funded, and there are some measures put in, which for me is essentially managing the situation. I'm not actually convinced as yet that it's not actually tackling the core issue. So I would be concerned that we could be, on paper, doing quite a bit, and all of that is very important. I have to stress it is very important, and it has managed to ease some tension, it has reduced some of the problems, but I don't believe it's really tackling the core of it. So I do share the view that you've both expressed, or that you need specific measures in place and specific targets in place to be delivered. Except that these issues are very complex. I mean, I know quite well dealt with it from a situation in the Lower Ormo for some time now. So it is being managed, but again, I just think it's actually just a little pocket of a problem, and it's been managed more quietly because it's within a very transient part of the city. So there isn't like a settled community around it, which is complaining every day in a week, which many of them actually do, but it's more hidden almost. I'm just sort of following on from some of the earlier questions. I mean, and some of the specifics, because Mark, you referred to the PSI, and some of that hadn't worked. I'm not sure why you said some or all, but I think myself that some have worked, maybe some have not. But in terms of some of the specifics around these, I mean, have you been talking to the departments on specific issues that you're not getting satisfaction on? I mean, you should add maybe, I know you said you said constantly with them, and you came to the DSD committee there last year around benefit-related issues, and just for the record for the committee, I mean, in terms of the Welfare Reform Bill, it would exclude people who would be everywhere else in Europe entitled to access to benefits from January. This bill proposes not to do that, to follow along with Westminster. So that's just putting that on the record, and ICM came in and made a very strong argument about that. So in terms of the range of issues that you see as outstanding problems, can you enlighten us with any of the specifics you put to the department, and some which you got satisfaction on, and are there some that you didn't? I mean, it may be difficult to answer that today, but because I think for us, in order to maybe try and take it forward, we need to go and say, well, actually, because some of these are actually arguing, you're saying you need a dedicated strategy, they're saying they don't. You're saying there are specific issues of concern. But I want to know is then, give me some of those so that we can go back to the department and say, there's a specific issue, how you deal with it. You know what I mean?
Well, I think the two issues here, before this new network being set up, in the past you have Manitoba, and also other traveller group at the forefront on those traveller policy issue. But now the whole thing gone, and as a result, that's exactly why we set up or we nice and really support to help them to set up a traveller-led network, so that they will talk directly to the department people rather than through another third party. For me, it's much more appropriate and also part of the empowerment process. I think the Roma traveller and gypsy issue will not get away, but I think my concern is whether, especially the resources issue. So if they think more strategically, they could save money. At the same time, they can do it in much effective way than rather each department they doing their own. So for me, this is also the necessity now in terms of the resources allocated.
Okay, thank you.
Leslie Cree.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I fully understand and support racial equality, but there does seem to be a tension in this here, in that on the one hand, we wish to have integration, and on the other, we also have accommodating nomadism, people's ability to travel.
Yes.
How can we reconcile that tension?
I think in the race strategy, the previous 6 aim, they all, cut across this issue. There's not, I don't see, there's any conflict. Integration, it is a process. And also integration is a two-way traffic. It is not a one-way traffic. In most cases, if you look at, the policy here of the GB, when we talk about integration, they more impose the burden or responsibility to ethnic minority, simply arguing, you are not integrated. Either you are not speaking English, or you segregate yourself. But if you look at the evidence from UN Committee research report and everything, because that lack of the kind of prejudicial mindset from the local community. And I think that is the most difficult one. Sometimes they're not prejudiced, but because of misinformation, misunderstand the culture, language, or other barrier the ethnic minority people facing. So that's why for me the starting point is we need to know each other. We need to be in a good neighborhood or shared neighborhood.
Just to further answer that question, there's an awful lot of generalizations about the traveller and gypsy community regarding the whole integration and segregation. I grew up in West Belfast. My family actually was segregated racially. My family tried to get me in a school in West Belfast, in a mainstream school. And it's only in 2002 that school actually has an open door policy for the settled community to come into that school, where my family were excluded. My family actually got turned away from 4 or 5 schools in that area of West Belfast simply because we were travellers. We wanted actually to be integrated. We wanted to be part of the community, but we were excluded until the Race Relations Order in 1997 came into Northern Ireland. So there is misinformation there. Travellers have always wanted to be included and be part of the community, but we're seen to be excluding ourselves because we want to live amongst our own community. So that gives some sort of conflicting idea that we want to be, which isn't the case.
I think that's the point. So what you're saying is that the community, basically, and there are exceptions, really wishes to be settled. Is that the case?
Well, it's not that we want to be settled. There are some travellers that do want to be settled, some travellers who want to stay nomadic. But if nomadism doesn't mean to be segregated, they want to be integrated. Travellers are not completely nomadic. They will always have a base. Like that site in West Belfast, where I'm from, on the Glenroe camp. This has been there since 1968. And travellers, about 40% of the travellers from that site are nomadic, but they come back every year. So travellers are not a complete nomadic grouping. We are settled, if you know.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Thank you. Stephen Mitry.
Chair, thank you, and you're very welcome. Patrick, at the outset, if I read you right, you indicated you didn't know how many, what the population of Roma was here. Government statistics would indicate there are probably 500, and that's unlikely to rise significantly. What evidence is there that the Roma are disadvantaged more than any other group in Northern Ireland? And can I also ask you, when you refer to Roma, do you include Irish traveller in that group as well?
Well, I think I try to draw attention to this committee because this is the European program or the proposal from the European Commission. They're using the European definition, which means the Roma including all those groups, whether you are traveller, gypsy, or others. So that is one sense. And I think just like the previous colleague asked the same question. Because there's no difference between Roma, Gypsy, and traveller or other, nomadic group. Because the whole is about the treatment they were being received. So there are different ways, to give that kind of prejudice against this group. Now the issue is how far we could help them to what we call either you're using settled or integrated. Exactly what we would like the government to have certain strategy to fastening the whole process. The vulnerability is not defined by us in here. It is international being defined. That's why I call all the UN committee. The same has the definition of Roma is based on the Council of Europe, which the European Union using it. I think both the Council of Europe and European Union see the whole Roma across Europe is one of the bigger issues in the 22nd century. And I think exactly both sides, they set up different measures to how to tackle this issue. So that's why for me, the vulnerability has been defined and very clear cut, it is, under the international human rights standard.
If I can come back, yes. I take on board what you say in relation to Roma in countries like Spain and Italy, where there are hundreds of thousands. But we have an estimate here of probably about 500.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, these folk are here by choice.
Yes.
If they come from Romania or Bulgaria, they're earning probably 5 times the wage if they're working legally as they would work at home.
Yes.
So we've got to remember they're here by choice.
Yes. Well, I think this is by choice, yes. But at the same time, the whole issue is about accessibility to other public services. Now, what the Commission's proposal is more focused on the 4 policy areas, like on housing, on education, on employment, as well as, on the health issue. So whether they could assess this thing. Now, the evidence we get is from Traveller or others. These are still the 4 areas. They have difficult to get assessed. So they exactly what we see. This is the kind of vulnerability. You can also see this exactly the same as the UN conclusion observation, more focused that 4 area. So that's why it is not easy one. But I think we would like to have the kind of political leadership to move the way forward.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Patrick and Mark, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will certainly keep an eye out for the strategy. We had, as I say, I should hope to get a briefing last week, but it is still under consideration. Members, item 7 is another oral briefing, this time from officials in relation to the sexual orientation strategy. Page 70 of your electronic pack is the clerk's brief. Following that, correspondence highlighting a 2-phase process that is going to be undertaken. And then turning to your tabled pack from page 11, a copy of the process and of the consultation document itself. So we welcome Margaret Rose McNaughton, Patricia Carey, who's Head of Equality and Human Rights and Social Change, and Martina Hanna, the Acting Head of Gender Equality Policy. And 3 officials were with us last week, so members will recall Martina may need to lip read, so we need to take that into account. And so you'll let me know if you have any issues. Margaret Rose, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to come along today and talk about the developments in the sexual orientation strategy. You will have received a draft document as well as an outline of how we propose to take forward the development of a strategy. I just want to say just very briefly that ministers have given a commitment and have asked us to commence consultation. So the document that you have is intended to initiate public consultation, and along with that document we would plan to have an online survey available within the next week or so. Consultation itself then we would plan to take forward in 2 phases. Phase 1 would see the development or the establishment of a steering group. That steering group we would hope to work with to develop the strategy itself over the course of 12 weeks. And then phase 2 will be the analysis of all the consultation responses and the development of a final strategy for a period of further consultation. Martina here will walk us through the process from now until the end of an 18-week period. But very happy then to take any further questions that you would have on the documents that you have. Martina, would you like to just say a few words about the process itself?
Yes, and as I said last week, I was delighted to be up about the gender equality strategy. I'm really delighted to be here about the sexual orientation strategy. Over the last year, we have engaged very, very closely with the sector, very closely with ministers, and as you now know, ministers have instructed us to move towards the development of the strategy through a public consultation exercise. So on the 24th of February, the steering group is coming together for the first time. We would have liked to have had that steering group meeting a little bit earlier, but we wanted to engage with the committee first before we held the steering group meeting. The steering group consists of the key stakeholders in the sector. So the key stakeholders on the steering group are Rainbow, Carafriend, Here Am I, who are the lesbian organisation in Northern Ireland. We have representation on the steering group from the University of Ulster. We also have trade union representation on the steering group. And in addition to that, we have, of course, the officials, but our research colleagues in OFMdFM will be on the steering group as well. So as I say, they will meet on the 24th of February. After this meeting today with your good selves, we will issue out to the steering group our terms of reference, and we will also be issuing the draft document that you now have. There is a survey that is under development that will accompany that document. When the steering group meets, they will work a little bit more on that survey because it is in its draft stage, and we will share that survey with this committee before it goes out for public consultation in line with good practice, and we will be looking for further comments or anybody that wants to comment on that with the steering group. So on the 24th of February, we'll meet with the steering group. The first or the second week in March, but no later than the second week in March, we will be advertising the public consultation. It will commence on that time, and it will be a full 12-week public consultation on the commitment to produce a strategy. So the consultation, as part of the survey, will also include the ability to give written comments to us. We will offer a telephone line for people who would find either the written format or indeed the survey format challenging. So the telephone facility will be there, and we will also offer to meet groups of people who would want to meet with us to discuss the strategy. So that's all part of the consultation process. At the end of the 12 weeks, what we will be doing in OFMdFM with our research team will be to do a full analysis of the consultation responses. And at that stage, we will share that information with the committee at that time. Now, I should say, just to step back one little bit, the documents that the steering group will sign off on will include a project document, but it will also include a project plan. And within the detail of that project plan, which will span over the period of months that we will be working on this issue, we will have highlighted in that the very key stages at which we need to come back to the committee and inform of what's happening development-wise, and to seek maybe a little bit of further guidance and help and advice. We're very conducive to that. So at the end of the 12 weeks, we will have all of the responses back, and we would urge this committee to please encourage as many people to participate in that consultation process as possible. We want everybody across the sectors in Northern Ireland to be involved. When we then develop a sexual orientation strategy document based on the research, on the consultation process, we will then go out for a further 6-week consultation on the strategy itself. And that is the process that ministers have signed off on us to follow, and one that we're very delighted to be moving forward with at this stage. We have been very engaged with the sector, as I said. The sector have very much said that they are content with the process that we are following. We have attended every LGB forum meeting this last year. We have had the sector in to meet with us on several occasions, and we've engaged directly with ministers in the sector as well in getting to this stage. So that, in very much in a nutshell, there is more detail on the process, but if you want to ask me any questions about that, more than happy to discuss it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you both. Perhaps to begin with, how did you choose your partners for the steering group?
The key partners in the sector are Rainbow, who are the gay organisation, and they represent LGBT and T issues. So they have actually put an awful lot of research and have been very involved with us over the last year. Here NI is the only lesbian organisation in Northern Ireland at this moment in time. There have been organisations in the past, but they are no longer sort of involved with us, or indeed some of them don't exist. But Here NI is the new name for an organisation that used to be referred to as Lassie. So that's that part of the sector, and we couldn't forge ahead without them. Cara Friend are really an organisation that looks after young LGBT and T people, although T is the gender equality strategy, as we're all aware, but they look after that range, and that's how we chose them. We've had very strong engagement with them. But as we move forward, I would suggest that when the strategy is up and running, the vision is to have not a panel as such. I don't like the word panel, which is why I'm saying not a panel as such. What we would be looking for is a group of people that will have ownership of developing the strategy forward and overseeing its implementation.
You mentioned the University of Ulster.
Yes.
I suppose the obvious question is, with two physical universities, why one and not the other?
It wasn't why one or the other. The particular person from the University of Ulster that is engaged with us on the strategy at this stage, and there are a range of academics that we will be consulting with as we move forward that have an interest in this sector. But the person from the University of Ulster that is on the steering group had actually said they would have a desire to bring all of the gender equality experience and sexual orientation experience they have to that table, and they'd agreed to sit with us on developing forward, and that is not going to cost anything as well. They're given their services completely free of charge.
I hope you don't think this is an odd question, but it's a sexual orientation strategy.
Yes.
Lesbians, gays, bisexuals and transgender.
No, transgender does not fit within the sexual orientation strategy. And the transgender, I apologise, I cut across you there, I do apologise. The transgender community is another community within our society that I work exceptionally closely with, and we've had great engagement with them. They wish, and they are very clear about their wish, to be identified with the gender equality strategy, and in legal terms, transgender is a gender equality issue, and it is a very clear definition. The transgender community, again, I do work exceptionally closely with them, are very aware of where they sit within our strategies, and indeed that is their desire. They associate with the LGB, and quite rightly do associate with the LGB sector, but it is as a minority voice joining with other minority voices that gives strength of voice on minority issues, but only for that reason.
Yeah, okay, because you do reference them on page 2 of the document.
They are, yes, and they are referenced rightly on page 2, but they're referenced on page 2 from the point of view that they would associate with the sector, but simply because of the minority voice. But the issue clearly and absolutely sits within the gender equality strategy.
That's very clear.
Thank you. Sorry.
Wasn't the question.
Okay.
Which was, I hope this does not sound odd, but sexual orientation, lesbians, gays, bisexuals.
Yes.
Is there a role for heterosexuals?
We actually were talking about that earlier on, and yes, the answer is yes, because regardless of whether you're heterosexual or you're lesbian, gay or bisexual, it is a sexual orientation.
Exactly.
You're correct. And it's one thing that we haven't sort of given an awful lot of clarity to in this, but that is something that we will be talking about as we move forward.
Well, how will that voice be represented on the steering group?
Well, I will be honest with you. It is something that we actually raised this morning as an issue. But if we feel that it needs to be developed into the steering group, we will do it. We will do it.
Chair, can I also just make a comment? If you have other sections of the community that you feel should be represented on this group, I'm very happy to take a look at any of the views that you might have on that. Certainly we would like to get as many people on the steering group as possible that can give us a wide range of views.
Okay. Alex Maskey.
I was going to say, Chair, I do think it is an odd question because if nobody's saying generically the heterosexual community or people face specific areas of discrimination, whereas others do, very clearly, and that's evidence-based. But in terms of the paper there, you say in phase 1 that the steering group, and I know you've already said that the steering group hasn't met and you'd like to maybe that it would have met. So for me, thinking, like, would like to be looking at something which the steering group has looked at and endorsed, because they're really representative of the sectors who are feeling particularly these forms of discrimination or barriers or whatever. So at what point do you think would we have sight of something around what would be going out for consultation, which would be endorsed by the steering group?
Yes, can I just say that this particular document has been developed in line with our consultation with the members that are going to be on the steering group. However, they have not met as a steering group to actually physically endorse those papers. But after this meeting today, these papers will be issued out in advance of the steering group meeting, so that when we come together on the 24th, we can actually do proper business rather than waiting closer to that date and having discussions at that point. We will have discussions, obviously, but it's to give them advance notice.
But, sorry, Chairman, I mean, but would you be expecting that the steering group, because the document's there, the steering group theoretically may decide we don't like it and not endorsing it?
Yes, and that's one of the things I'd said earlier on. I have really very, very close working relationships with the sector, and we have discussed what may or may not be in this document before the document was produced. So my feeling and my understanding of how the sector will react to this document at this moment in time is based on the conversations that we have had. So I'm very comfortable that they will be accepting of this document.
Okay, thanks, Martina. I mean, I do welcome it very much so. I actually do think it will be a much better product if people from the specific sectors are directly involved in this in a more organic way, really.
Yeah.
Okay.
In terms of the numbers that we're talking about here, I worked with the Rainbow Project on a health event a few weeks ago, and they estimated that UK-wide, the percentage of the population who would be classified as LGBT would be 6 to 10%, which would translate into 108 to 180,000 people in Northern Ireland. Is that your reading?
Well, our reading is there are no definitive figures at this moment in time. There are a range of different figures that have been produced, but there are no definitive figures. And for me, that is a very clear challenge of the sexual orientation strategy when it is produced, that it will actually direct that there is good data collection and data analysis on a regular basis within the boundaries of Northern Ireland. And in fact, I would go as far as to say that it is the one equality area where there are no absolutely complete statistics gathered at this moment in time.
Right. And maybe, sorry, I should maybe add, I think those figures they got from Her Majesty's government, who were researching the impact of same-sex marriage, and came to the 6 to 10%, and then they've just extrapolated out. Margaret Rose, sorry, I thought I...
No, just to reiterate a little bit of what Martina was saying, that is one of the key issues for us in the development of a strategy, is that we need to have good information systems, we need to have good data collected, because, in reading a number of the documents that have been produced recently, in some cases people are saying they're up to 10,000. people from the lesbian, gay and bisexual community. In another document I read, it could be up to 120,000, so that's a huge difference. And I think it would be one of the priorities for the strategy.
What about reported cases then of harassment and the rest from that sector?
Well, clearly there are there's data available at the moment. PSNI will record figures relating to the number of incidents and how they translate then into hate crimes. The figures that I have seen so far would suggest that those figures are increasing. Now, that could be because people are becoming more confident either in reporting, or it could be that actually there are more incidents and the hate crimes are increasing. But, again, I think that is something that, well, the PSNI certainly have been quite proactive in producing those figures.
Yes, and I have the figures for 12-13 here. And if you just bear with me 1 second until I get that figure in front of me. Yep. Yeah, the figure of reported incidents in 2012-2013 was 246 in Northern Ireland, of which 149 translated as a criminal offence. It's quite a stark statistic for a small community.
So in what way do you think a strategy and an action plan will tackle those statistics?
The way I see this strategy tackling those statistics is by actually giving effect to the laws that we already have. Now, we have a range of laws that actually do say that it is not acceptable to, treat people differently just because of their race, religion, or their sexual orientation. We do have those laws in place. But the strategy, by its very presence, actually helps to raise the awareness of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, and actually makes the life for the community more acceptable in terms of visibility. So yes, the other thing about this is, and that is a known statistic, it's a factual statistic, but it may not be a correct statistic, because there may be a range of instances that have not been reported simply because of fear in the community. But as the strategy progresses, we will have a team that will actually be able to gather more solid information in a range of ways, analyse it and help us move forward.
So if 149 of the 246 were criminal, therefore 97, the other 97 were not. Can you give us some sort of flavour of what they are and whether this will address?
Well, we asked PSNI to describe that for us, and I'm really glad you've asked the question. And what they have said is that a homophobic hate incident is defined as any incident which may or may not constitute a criminal offence, but it has raised the awareness of the police. Like any other incident, if the police are called out, it may or may not be a criminal offence. So a homophobic hate crime is defined as any hate incident which constitutes a criminal offence perceived to be homophobic by the victim or another person. So that's the description that we have. So as you would move forward with a strategy, the strategy raises the visibility of the issue. It raises the concern that the public and government has in addressing these issues. And by its presence alone, it says this is not acceptable.
To what extent do you think this is a cross-cutting strategy?
Yes, very much it is a cross-cutting strategy, and just, as you've said, we've had, since we've got the instruction to move forward with this, which is fabulous, we are working with our race equality lead. We're going to be working with our policy leads on age, policy leads on poverty, because sexual orientation, by its very nature, can actually impact on older people in a different way than it does on a younger generation that fit within this sector. And when it comes to BME, Black Minority Ethnic Groups, that also then has another range of connotations that are really very unique to that particular group of people. So yes, as we develop this strategy, and again we will be asking our other policy leads within the Directorate not just to work with us, but to encourage their stakeholders to participate in the feedback we get from the survey.
I note you're delighted, the green light for taking this forward. It has been a long time coming. Can you explain the delay?
Well, you know, all I can say is that over the past year, from when we have taken over the work of this particular unit, I mean, there has been a considerable amount of work carried out. I know that it was maybe first mentioned in about 2006 or pre-devolution, but you know, I can't explain why there has been such a delay. All I can say now is that we have dedicated resources into this particular strategy and the gender equality strategy. So, and I know that ministers are very keen that we make as much progress as possible on this and get a strategy that is, you know, fit. I don't like the word fit for purpose, but a strategy that, you know, can actually make a difference to the lives of the LGBT community, as well as be, you know, a reasonable strategy that people can actually agree to and sign up to. And I think that is our aim within the next 18 weeks, that we can develop that.
And in terms of the document itself, which is a draft, I accept that, a draft consultation document, it's 10 pages, 8 lines on vision. Is that a good balance?
I would suggest, my apologies, Margaret Rose, my apologies. I would suggest that the way this document is to animate discussion and to animate interest of the public across Northern Ireland, so that when we get the feedback on the survey, that the survey and the analysis of what that produces will actually inform the direction of the sexual orientation strategy, and it will develop on the objectives that we have mentioned there. Or it might generate something slightly different, or something more, or something less. But what we are doing, for me, this is true public engagement and true sector engagement in the development of the policy.
Okay, you could equally argue, I suggest, that as Margaret Rose says, we've been waiting since 2006, so the LGBT community has been waiting 8 years, and they get 1 line per year.
The LGBT community are very, very much engaged with us, and I have to say, as we move forward with this, the LGBT community will be the key stakeholders on the steering group that will guide and direct us and work with us.
Okay. Deputy Chair Chris Little.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks very much for your presentation. Notwithstanding the Chair's well-articulated length of delay in arrival, I welcome the announcement here today. My party colleagues and I have brought a number of motions to the Assembly in relation to this issue, so I'm hoping that this is a positive step in the right direction. I think I agree with you in terms of the phased approach being a positive one, but I hope that it's communicated as clearly as possible. In effect, you're saying that phase 1 is basically a call for ideas in relation to a strategy?
Can I just say, I think we would hope that it is actually more than that. I think we would intend that we, sitting down with the steering group, that we can come up with very clear outcomes for the actual strategy, and that they will contribute to the actual development of the actual writing of that strategy, so that we have agreed outcomes that we can then take back and go out for a further series of public consultation. But I think it's only with working with the sector that we can turn the objectives that I think are part of the current consultation document. But if we turn those into clear outcomes that we can all be, sure that we are actually aiming to meet. And I think it's more than just looking for ideas. I think we actually want to sit down with the sector and make sure that we develop just very clear outcomes for them.
How do you avoid confusing the public that it's not actually a consultation on a strategy then. I'm not 100% clear on what you're asking for from the general public as opposed to the sector then in this phase 1 part of the process.
Do you mind if I take this forward? My idea of this, and certainly the way we have been presenting this at the direction of ministers, as you'd be aware, is that for me this is best practice in the actual production of a good government policy document, because it is public policy, government, stakeholder interaction in developing a document. For me, it would be fundamentally wrong if I, as the policy person in OFMdFM, sat and wrote a strategy without that engagement and without knowing the current feel for the public in Northern Ireland and what they would want into this strategy at this moment in time. So very clearly the first 12 weeks consultation will inform the development of the strategy, and we'll be very clear about that in our ads going out. And we will advertise in all of the papers, on our website, and through this committee and through our stakeholders clearly. But it is with a view to getting a very robust, and I don't like using that word, but it is what I mean on this occasion, a very robust document. Now, once we have the document, we will then go out for further public consultation to see, have we missed anything? Is there anything that we haven't done that we should have done? And for me, this is best practice in public consultation.
Will the survey make it slightly clearer in terms of what type of response you're looking for from the public at phase 1 then? Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
it will. It will, absolutely. This document is really the advertisement for the consultation.
Okay. Any reason why 6 weeks for the full final consultation rather than slightly longer then?
My thinking on it, and we have had discussions around this, my thinking of it was we would have the 3-month period, the 12-week period, to consult on what should be in the document, how the document would look. And I'll hold my hands up, it was me that then said the further 6 weeks. Now, I'm not precious about that. If we believe, and we're going to actually amend this slightly to ask, do we need a 12-week? Or if this committee is saying to me now, I think you should do another 12 weeks, it will mean that we will spend half a year on public consultation.
Conscious of that, yeah.
Yes, but not precious about that. If that is what is felt is the best way forward, we'll do that and we'll take that on board.
Can I ask if, as I say, I think this best practice framework you're putting into place is a positive thing. Can I ask why it hasn't been used in any of the other key strategies in relation
we
to
will
this,
be doing
like TBUC, for example?
Yeah, this is my engagement with the sector and how we sort of developed a draft business plan for managing this consultation, and sort of taken, you sort of review the different consultations. Sorry, I wasn't able to see your face for a second. We sort of review the different things you've done in the past. And certainly the experience we've had on the gender equality strategy, we've been able to use some of the experiences we've had with that and translate that across into this. And likewise, what we do on this, we will analyse at the end of the period to see, was it best practice? Should we do something slightly different the next time round? And if this works out really, really well, then we'll recommend it as a best practice exercise.
Yes, I
Two very quick last questions, Chair. The good relations indicators at this moment in time, as far as I'm aware, don't involve any indicators in relation to sexual orientation. And second, last question, are other departments who have clear remits to work in relation to this, for example, bullying in schools, and Department for Employment and Learning that has undertaken work in relation to sexual equality, orientation equality in the workplace?
Yeah.
Are they being included in the steering group, for example?
They will be included as we move forward. We cannot move forward without them, and we're very, very clear on that particular issue. The purpose of the steering group at this moment in time is to gather the public consultation, and we will go to the departments because, yes, they are our colleagues, but they are also to be publicly consulted with as well. And our departments have actually been in touch with us. Some of them have their own action plans already developed. We've gathered all of that information, and we do, as I said, as much as we work closely with the stakeholders, the departments, this committee, ministers are also our key stakeholders. So yes, we work. In a nutshell, we
Good relations indicators.
Good relations indicators. As we said earlier on, the data on LGB is not, it's not what it should be, and it is something that the strategy will actually be aiming to put right.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Alex Maskey for a
Sorry,
quick
Chair, just a
supplementary.
very brief point on the back of Chris's point there around the period of consultation. I mean, the delay has been at the back end of this process, so therefore I would just be conscious that if, for example, the stakeholder in the panel thought there needed to be a lengthier time for public consultation, I think that should be, the key.
Very happy to do that.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, Martina, Margaret Rose and Patricia, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very well.
Thank you very much.
Members, our final oral briefing is on the recent announcement on funding allocations under the Social Investment Fund, as announced by the First Minister in the Chamber on Monday of last week, 10th of February. Page 76 of your electronic pack has the clerk's brief, and that's followed by a copy of the press release from last week, and that is followed by a copy of Hansard from the last briefing we received on SIF, which was on the 5th of December last. As with the 5th of December last, the Department has not provided any papers in advance of this briefing.
It was last time.
Same as last time. So we welcome to committee Ricky Irwin, Joe Reynolds and Lawrence Hyland. Ricky, before we begin with your opening remarks, when were you aware of the First Minister's intention to make that announcement last Monday?
After the announcement was made.
Okay. Have you any idea why the First Minister was left in the embarrassing position of telling the House that the information was on the website when it wasn't?
No.
Okay. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Slide my statement. There it is. Chair, members, thanks very much for having us here today. We're here today to take questions on the ministerial announcement of the initial tranche of 23 projects for the Social Investment Fund worth over £33 million. This is, of course, a milestone and important achievement in the delivery of this significant programme through OFMdFM. The announcement provides an early indication of the scale of the projects, both revenue and capital, which will begin to make a difference to the most hard-pressed communities across Northern Ireland. Chair, you will understand that I want to avoid discussing the detail of the individual projects as we're continuing to work through the finer arrangements to appoint some of the lead partners and to offer those organisations that will be responsible for delivery of those projects. Our colleagues in the Finance and Governance Division of the Department are currently visiting potential lead partners. This is a process which is ongoing at the minute, and they're conducting verification and pre-contract checks on those organisations to determine their governance and capacity to deliver and take forward the contracts and potential letters of offer. It would be premature, of course, to discuss the details until those visits have been completed, but we do expect that to happen by the end of this month. This announcement marks progress in terms of clearing the internal stage of approvals for those projects, which have been prioritised by the local steering groups. And we're still working on a further 29 projects across the 9 social investment zones. And we hope that ministers will be in a position to announce those later this year. At that point, we will have 52 projects worth a total of £80 million to be delivered across the coming years. The committee has previously asked about the security of the funding for the programme, and I can assure you that the commitment by ministers to deliver £80 million through the project remains total. The release of funding to this initial tranche of 23 projects represents over 40% of the programme fund. The remainder will be announced as soon as we can complete the internal approvals for the remaining projects. And like I say, we hope to be complete with that process before the summer. This is, of course, good news, but I understand that there may be some here who are disappointed. A decision to fund 52 projects means that there are around 40 projects that were put forward by the steering groups that will not be affordable within this current programme. No one should doubt that many of those projects are valuable and deemed to be important to those local communities. However, any programme of this type and scale will inevitably attract more applications than it can afford. Where possible, we will, of course, work with local steering groups and project promoters to see if it's possible to deliver those projects and support them through other interventions, such as across the Delivering Social Change framework and through other collaboration with colleagues in other departments. Chair, like I say, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be here today. I'm happy, of course, to take any questions. I think this is possibly my 5th appearance on the Social Investment Fund, and indeed it's good news that we bring today, I think, and we're happy, of course, to try and answer any queries that members will have around that.
Thank you very much. Well, Stephen Woodry is keen.
Thank you, Chair. Really, I just want to say, I think it is very much good news story. It's been long awaited on, and some were concerned around the timescale, but it's got there at the end of the day, and I know definitely in the area that I represent, people are very thankful across the constituency, and I pay tribute to you all for your work.
Alex Maskey.
Thank you, Chair. It's just following on from your own point there, Ricky, in terms of obviously this has been a while and resolving, and thankfully we're moving quite a way along our road. In terms of the number of groups in those areas, because obviously there'll be groups who will be saying, what about us, we didn't get it, or whatever else, and some of that's fairly understandable. So can you give us a sense of a readout in your discussions? I know it's kind of subjective because it's your opinion on it, but what would your assessment be in terms of the state of play within those panels, in terms of the results so far, or expectations for the next?
Sure. I haven't been personally involved in the discussions, and maybe Joe and Lawrence who have. I'd invite them really to give a sense of those discussions.
In terms of the announcements we've made so far, I think, as already indicated, steering groups are happy to see progress, and I think there's a sense of relief that we've got to the stage we're at. That they're anxious to see that progress continue in terms of the additional support that we're putting in place to help the partners deliver the projects. We attended, myself and other members of the team attended each one of the 9 steering groups over the period between late November and the early part of this year, to ask them to have a look again at the prioritisation that they had afforded to the projects within the area plans. And they were very cognisant of the fact that the applications meant that the programme was heavily oversubscribed, and therefore the onus was on them to reflect local need in terms of the prioritisation they afforded to the projects. In most cases, they confirmed the decisions that they had made around about this time last year, and they recognised that lower order priority projects were likely to not find funding in the current round. Some of them have looked at ways in which they can find funding from other sources. That was always going to be their plan, and some of them have been successful in that. In other cases, I think there is a realisation that their assessment of need will have changed over a period of time, and some of the projects maybe would no longer have the priority that they would have had last year. So I think, as Ricky has already indicated,
it's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of happy to see progress, disappointed that they couldn't have done more, but realising that there's only so much funds that you can apply to these things.
Thank you.
Let me pick up on something you just said there, Joe, because I think you said that you and Ricky went round the steering groups, the 9 zonal advisory panels between December and January.
Well, I didn't.
Myself and other members of the team, yeah.
Right, okay. So you went. This would seem to refer back to evidence from Hansard on the 4th of December in your last appearance when Ricky said, we're in the middle of detailed discussions with all the steering groups. That's the same process?
Yeah, exactly.
And Ricky goes on to say, and when those are complete, we'll write to the committee with their detailed outcome. I don't believe we've received a letter.
Last week.
There was a letter issued last week, I believe.
The letter in the pack today. Okay. Give me spread.
Yeah, well, I'm not so worried about letters as some people are concerned about letters and reports coming to the committee. The important thing is the announcement, Ricky. And I want to put on record the thanks of a lot of people in the community to the officials of the department who have worked very hard on this whole thing. And also I think another thing that needs to be put on record, and I know that you work very closely, Joe in particular, is the folks on the steering group from all sections of the community who work together very actively and I think in a very proactive way and a very responsible way to try and bring this thing to fruition. I mean, I understand it very well, the reasons why you probably can't talk to us today in relation to obviously schemes and all the rest of it. I mean, that would be commercially sensitive probably, as you will be told in some other committees. So, but I mean, I think through yourselves, I mean, the committee here should put on record their thanks to the steering groups and to her. And I know there's some other folks recently have come on to the steering groups who will be, in my own area, will be extremely beneficial to the steering groups and particularly the business community that have come on board. So it's it's certainly very welcome in some of the areas that I represent in South Belfast, and people are very thankful for how it has come about. So thank you.
If I could just, on the back of that, first of all, thanks, but also take this opportunity to express my gratitude to the small team which Lawrence and Joe actually lead, who, as you say, have put a lot of time and effort to get us to this point. And also, just to say the point about the steering groups, the level of commitment that has been maintained by those steering group members during this period, which, when I was involved in setting up the steering groups back in the summer of 2012, quite a while ago, and the commitment is still there, and I've been heartened by the positive feedback that we've got since the announcement was made last week.
So on the question of the steering groups, sorry, Jimmy, are you?
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Thank you. Well, when we spoke in December, we were discussing statutory members and business community. What was the outcome? Did they ever get appointed?
That's a process I know is still ongoing. Some are on board. Perhaps Joe or Lawrence could give us some more. I don't think we're in a position to give the full outcome of where we are with each of the steering groups right now, but we were bringing on board other members.
So what progress has been made since December?
Letters have been issued, Chair, to those nominated, and we're waiting on replies coming back from some, but they have been invited and some have attended recent steering group meetings.
So how many business people are sitting on how many steering groups?
Don't have that detail with us, unfortunately.
But 40% of the funds have been allocated.
And the steering groups will continue to have a central role when we move into the delivery phase, which we're doing now.
George Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to the team as well. Just from my own point of view, I'd like to thank all involved in the social development. Money that's very much needed on the ground, and it's been well received as well. And from 29 projects, I think there's 52. When do you anticipate the full rollout, of all the monies?
Okay, thanks. First of all, we're continuing to work through the economic appraisals for the remaining 29, and we'll be hopeful that by the summer we'll have the remainder of those projects through that process, and then ministers will be in a position to make a further announcement.
But a big thank you to everybody involved in it. It's very, very welcome monies and well received on the ground.
Okay.
There were, I think when we last spoke again, some projects which had gone through 2 iterations, some 3 and exceptionally 4. Have any now dropped off entirely?
No, don't think so, no. No. No.
So you still have £130 million worth of proposals for the 80 million pot?
That's right.
At what point does that...
Sorry, Chair, just to be clear, the 130 million plus represents the 10 projects in each of the area plans for the 9 zones. What we are now doing is working specifically on, as Ricky said in his opening remarks, on 52 projects which are considered to be affordable within the 80 million pounds that's available. So we have business cases for the balance of that, the some 40 odd projects that Ricky referred to, which we're holding, because if between now and the summer, when we complete the economic appraisal of those 29 projects, for whatever reason any of them were deemed to be unviable or we weren't able to progress with them, then we would move down the prioritised list, as I said earlier in answer to the previous question, that the steering groups have identified for us. We would simply move to the next in the priority order that they have both presented last year and confirmed in the negotiations around the Christmas period just past.
Okay, so to be clear, you had 130 million. You've now narrowed it down to 80 million as your...
No, it was always 80 million. We had 130 million pounds worth of applications. Yes. The fund was always set at 80 million.
And out of that 130 million of applications, you've identified
52 projects
worth 80 million.
Correct.
Yep. 80 million.
And you've given a green light to 40%, and you're now looking at the rest. And if any of those fall for any reason, you go back to the projects which represent the 80 to 130 million in that list.
Yep. In conjunction with the steering groups.
In the queue.
Yeah.
Alexander.
Thank you, Chair. And as I've said before, in respect to this or any other funding programme, if there are good projects that deserve funding, then they should get funded. If there's bad projects that shouldn't get funded, they shouldn't be funded. And we'll work out if they're all good projects or if some of them are bad projects. And on that, I think the jury is a bit out. I agree with Mr. Reynolds that whilst there may be some commentary about these being well received, in my own constituency today and in Derry yesterday, I can tell you groups who are anything but well received in terms of these announcements. So my questions are, I may well rattle through them because you'll have an opportunity to answer these fully in AQs anyway, but if that's not a contradiction in terms, answers fully in AQs, but I might yet be impressed and surprised by answers to various questions that have been submitted. So the first question is that, is it now the case that the £80 million budget, however it is getting reprofiled over the various spending periods, that the £80 million budget is actually now going to be spent in part after 2018?
No, that's not the intention.
That's what the intention is.
To spend the money over the period 14 to 18.
So the quote in the letter of 13th of February, which says, quote, CIF expenditure has been reprofiled over 2014 and 18 and beyond. What does that mean? And beyond, is that
infinity?
Beyond 20? Is it beyond 2018, or is it all going to be spent before 2018? Because the question obviously arises is, how do we have a programme that needed £80 million budget in 2011, where we now have a situation where it's now going to be maybe 2018 before it's all spent, and even beyond that?
The substantial amount of spend we expect in the next 2 financial years, £80 million was the intention from 2011 to 2015. Last year, ministers did extend that period.
Or 3 years, because the letter again relies upon 3 years for significant spend. Is it now 2 years?
It's over this year, next year, and possibly into the year after. We are in the process of profiling the projects which have been announced in detail. When the projects were submitted, they were submitted for 2 and 3 year periods, some of them beyond 3 year periods. So there is scope to go from 2014 and 2018, specifically on the SIF projects.
But not beyond.
Well, I don't intend to go beyond.
Well, this has always been a bit of a movable piece, so we'll rely upon those words. Can I ask you, are the projects that have been announced today, how many of them are required to be tendered under the European requirements?
I wouldn't have the exact number with me, but I could come back to you on that. Some of them, given their scale and size, will have to go to the EU journal under market tendering. Yeah, don't know the number.
Well, could you come back on that?
Absolutely.
So
No
so we know that what are all the hurdles are before we get to anything ever being spent. Can I ask you? You referred earlier that officials are now carrying out what you referred to as governance and capacity checks.
Yes.
Governance and capacity checks. So here we are, 3 years after the scheme was announced, and we're now checking out whether organisations can or cannot deliver them.
Yes. Well, the reason for that is because when we're at the point of having approvals in place for the projects, that is when we need to instigate the due diligence checks on the lead partners that have been proposed by the steering groups. And that's where we are now.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the Dell and CPD procurement for Steps to Work in 2009, where announcements were made in August of 2009 for the award of Steps to Work contracts to various contractors, one of whom at the time had one member of staff in Northern Ireland with a mobile phone, and they were given 2 weeks to prove that they could deliver the programmes or not. There seems to be a bit of suck it and see here.
Well, we have been carrying out the due diligence checks over the last few weeks, and as I said earlier, plan to be finished by the end of February, and that will tie in with finalising the letters of offer, which will then go out shortly after that.
And in the basis of your checks over the last 2 weeks, have you identified in respect of any of the proposals, governance and capacity problems?
No.
None?
None.
Can I ask you, in terms of the employment programmes that have been announced, were the discussions with Dell?
There were.
On all of them?
On all of them, yep.
And Dell sign off on all of them, did they?
Dell have, yes. Dell are content. In the current announcement, there are around half, £60 million worth, which equates to 6 employment projects. The outcomes are thousands of people going through work placements, training, placements, skills development, mentoring support, and it will all lead to better employability prospects, and Dell are fully supportive.
And they've signed off on all of the schemes that have been named so far?
There wouldn't be a requirement for Dell to sign off on those schemes. Those schemes were submitted to OFMdFM. We have, of course, been in very close contact with Dell right from the area planning process in October 2012.
When will we know who the lead partners are in respect of each of the schemes?
Very soon, if the committee asks for it. Once we've completed the process that I talked about earlier, the due diligence and the letters of offer have been issued and accepted by those lead partners, I think we would be in a position then to give that information.
In respect of the new build, I look forward to that information, because that will give you insight into whether what's good and what's not so good, in my view. In relation to the capital projects, which ones require planning permission?
Well, I don't have the detail of the projects with me.
I think, as the member knows, we're dealing with an assembly question in respect of those that were announced in the announcement last week, and we'll be providing that information. Not all of the capital projects required planning permission, and we're satisfied that planning permission is in place for the rest of them that needed it.
Already?
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
Well done. Can I just ask if there's some projects sitting at number 9 or 10 on the list and organisations like Sports NI are going to be maybe advertising funding fairly shortly.
Right.
And what do those projects do? You know, if it was a sporting organisation, if they're sitting at number 9 or 10,
Yeah. No,
and Sports NI is now going to be coming out to advertise funding, what do they do? They're in limbo.
It's a good question, and my advice and our advice to those projects has been that if there is funding that becomes available, that they shouldn't miss that opportunity to try and avail of that. So we would be given.
In fact, it's, Chair, through yourself, our advice is stronger than that, even in that. In most respects, applicants were expected to come to SIF when they had exhausted other avenues that were available to them. So if funding is available from other sources, then they should go to those sources.
Yeah.
And an organisation will know where they sit in the league table of 1 to 10 in their zone.
They will. They will through the steering group.
But will they know where they sit in the grand scheme of things?
And how do you mean in the grand scheme of things? They'll know where they sit within the affordability of that particular zone.
But do you have an overall list? Because you've obviously got those who are within the 80 million and those, those who lie outside. Now, presumably there's one that is the least likely ever within that 130 million.
Oh, you mean like a ranking from 1 to 90?
There's not a 1 to 90. Each zone has
There's 1 to 10
in each zone.
Yeah.
Right. And would it be reasonable if you were sitting at 9th or 10th to assume your chances are slim?
Not if you were.
Depends which zone you're in.
South East zone.
Not if you were in the South East zone.
Not if you're in the South East zone. And why would that be?
Undersubscribed.
Because all their projects are within the affordability of that zone. Which is, of course, good news.
Very good news.
Definitely.
If you happen to represent an area covered by the southeastern zone.
Just like an alley, thank you.
No, never mind Lagan Valley.
Never mind that.
Declare an interest, I live there as well. So.
Well, I do. Yes, I represent Strangford. Okay. Is there any more we can squeeze out of you in that regard?
What do you want to know?
Everything.
I mean, I think we've been fairly open today. If there are other questions that members come up with.
Sure, whenever we attended the committee at the beginning of December, we provided you with a list of the projects within each of the 9 zones, which we consider to be within those region of affordability for each one of the 9 zones. So that information has been provided.
And they're still in play.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good. Chris Little, Deputy Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the update, gentlemen. I think similar to what Alex Atwood has said, I welcome any investment in any projects that are likely to address dereliction and deprivation, so hopefully that's going to be the case for some of the projects that have been announced. Yep. Sorry. Apologies. Always forget that. I'm declaring interest as a member of the East Belfast Area Steering Group. Thanks, Chair. You take it with me every time I'm speaking on this. And therefore, welcome investment. My questions will not be in relation to the details that you have said that you'd like to avoid and that I would too, from a steering group point of view. In terms of the budgeting and the figures around the fund, it's my understanding that the reprofiling has now created a Delivering Social Change fund at £118 million, which is made up of the original Social Investment Fund profiled expenditure for years 11 to 15, I think it is.
That's correct.
Yeah, of £80 million, and then childcare budget 11 to 15. Of £12 million.
Yep.
And then Social Investment Fund 15 to 19 of £26 million. Is that the case?
19? 19? No.
I think that's what it says in the letter, but the letter also said to 2018 and beyond, and that's been disputed as well. So
I haven't seen 19 mentioned anywhere.
I think it's maybe said next comprehensive spending review. So there's no definitive deadline in relation to it then?
I think just to be clear on this, and I know this has been raised by the committee before, first of all to say again, and I've said it many times, £80 million remains ring-fenced for the SIF programme. But the Central Delivering Social Change Fund has been established, does include SIF and the 12 million, and there will be a run into the next CSR period. in relation to delivery of those projects. So when the £26 million was announced for the signature projects under delivering social change, that was a reassignment of some of the SIF funding.
So that's included in the Delivering Social Change Fund as well then? That's where it gets made up, the 118 million then?
That's right. That's right.
Okay. And in terms of the reprofiling then, how much of the 80 million that was profiled for 11 to 15 is actually likely to be spent within that time frame?
Couldn't answer that. We're still looking at the reprofiling in terms of the projects that have been announced, and then obviously we'll need to look at the further 29 projects once they go through the appraisal process, and there'll need to be detailed profiling for those as well.
Well, let me ask you about that, see if you can clear up some of this. I think we have some of the best Orwellian newspeak I've ever come across here in relation to that. It says that the financial profiles will be updated to reflect delivery realism.
Yes.
What does that mean?
It's just deliverability. That's deliverability in relation to the projects.
Sorry, can I just add
Sure,
to that,
sure.
Chair, if I may? In the process we're going through at the moment, we will have an initial take of the profile spend of the projects for which approval has so far been given. As we work through the remaining 29 projects, and the balance of that changes obviously between capital and revenue projects. Where revenue projects, and this might also refer to the question we were asked earlier about the timescale over which spend will take place. Where a business case is approved for, I think particularly revenue projects, it may well be that spend is predicated on a project running for a period of up to, usually not more than 3 years, but up to 3 years. And obviously our business case then, the spend will be profiled from the date at which that spend begins to be incurred. Given that we're still working on 29 projects, and the letters of offer for them may not issue until summer or after the summer, spend won't start until after that. So for a business case that's been approved for that duration, we'll reprofile this expenditure from that point onward for the duration of the project.
Okay, so how much of the £80 million for 11-15 spent would look like success then?
Oh, don't know, that's for us to determine that.
Well, I mean, until we actually get that profiling done for the 23 projects that are announced, it would be difficult to determine and answer that question. But I think, again, back to the point that we're at the point of issuing the letters of offer. We're at the point of actually starting to spend money, and I think we should focus on that and try to maximise delivery where we can, and make sure that we work closely with the communities to get the money spent in the right way on those projects.
Okay, but you accept as a member of the public or a member of this committee, looking at a fund that was ring-fenced to address dereliction and deprivation in the midst of a recession. The amount of that money that got spent or didn't spent is of material concern to both groups.
Absolutely.
And we would need to look at that closely, okay. In terms of projects meeting HMT Green Book standard, the letter that was sent to the committee says that 24 projects have passed OFMdFM appraisal, 2 of which have gone to DFP for review. What's the status of their review at DFP, and is that a normal ratio for that type of a process?
Those 2 projects are cleared by DFP. We agreed a sample size with DFP at the start of this when the approvals architecture was actually agreed with our finance division and DFP. They were content to ask for a sample of 2. Lawrence and the team have been in close contact through our finance division with some queries that came back on those particular projects, and they've been satisfied now, so they're content.
Okay, and in terms of the issue, which has gained some significant coverage in terms of establishment of need, the letter again says that what was forefront was the use of scale and identification of need in each zones. There was 3 measurements, 2 were in relation to traditional super output area measurements, and the 3rd one was independently verified and robust evidence of objective need.
Yep.
Were there projects that have been passed that utilised that measurement of need? And if so, can you give us specific examples of what independently verified and robust evidence looks like?
No, because I don't have the detail with me. There may have been, but I haven't been as close to the projects as others, so we would need to come back to you with that.
Okay. And
Thanks.
can you give us any update in relation to the gateway review process?
For SIF, I can say that a third gateway review has just been completed today, and Dennis McMahon, as SRO, has received the report. I haven't seen it. I don't know the outcome, so I can't comment any further.
But maybe for purposes of public understanding, what is a gateway review?
Gateway review is a mechanism which provides an assessment of delivery confidence to the senior responsible owner of the project. The process is that 2 or 3 people who are deemed independent are procured through CPD and interview a number of stakeholders in relation to that particular project over a short 2-day window. On the 3rd day, they write a report which they give to the SRO based on the information that they have. It will have a number of recommendations. It'll be up to the SRO then to implement those. They will be prioritised in terms of critical now or essential, or it can be done later. So we've gone through 2 before. They've been very helpful. In fact, I would say the last one has been so helpful that it really got us to the point where we are today in relation to announcing £33 million worth of projects. So we will continue to use the gateway process at key milestones in the future.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Mr. Chair, could I just ask a supplementary to that? Given that you've indicated in the correspondence that you're not prepared, or that it's been decided that the gateway report would not be shared, the last one, are you prepared to share the conclusions of the 2 to date and the 3rd now, or seek approval at a ministerial level for the release? Because they are deployed very often where there is a novel or a novel approach or a novel policy initiative, or where there's deemed to be some level of risk. So it would be useful to know what the conclusion are. The reason why I say it is that we did a gateway review about the housing executive, which we shared, I think, with other departments at the time, because we thought it was so useful.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think I personally couldn't answer that, because I think it is a matter for the SRO. It is a report that's given in confidence to the SRO, and that's really a matter for Dennis, and I'll need to take that back. Thanks.
Thank you. Leslie Cree.
Thank you, Chair. And I also welcome the project. It's been a long time, but it's good to see money actually been spent on the ground. Last time, Ricky, when we met, you told us that the time frame approved by the ministers was 2016.
Yep.
And now we're talking about, I wasn't just quite sure whether it be 2018, 19 or infinity. What actually has been approved by the ministers by way of that absolute time frame?
Well, the committee has got the letter which says that the money has been reprofiled over the 2014 to 18 period. So I would take that as...
It's approved to 2018?
Yes. Now, obviously, that will be subject to securing the additional money in at the start of the next CSR period. However, ministers have given that public commitment that the money is ring-fenced and will be there.
But that next CSR period is likely to be 1 year only?
That's the 15-16 period.
You're saying that it will be, or are you asking me?
Well, the current, I'm telling you, what hopefully is a fact, that the CSR period ends at the end of this mandate.
Okay.
So that you've 1 year possibly outside, and that's the question. Joe got it.
Well, I mean, all I can say is that the letter is quite clear. The projects will be delivered during the time frame that the money is there for them, and it's been profiled up to 2018.
Okay. Glad to have that on the record. Arising out of that, gentlemen, the question of sustainability comes into my mind. If you've got these projects where they're definitive, is there any issue about sustainability in any of those projects?
There are issues of sustainability in all of them. It's a consideration of the economic appraisal process. Sustainability has to be looked at in detail. There has to be a judgment around whether a particular project is sustainable, and that determines whether that project is actually viable. So all of them have been considered for sustainability.
So they have to be sustainable, that's what you're saying?
They have to be sustainable. There has to be a clear exit strategy in some of them. They're all very different.
Okay.
I mean, I don't want to get into
No, but you can see where I'm coming from. It's just a question of extra money. And finally, at the last meeting we had, you also mentioned the possibility at that stage of perhaps other projects still coming forward. Is that still an option?
Is this outside of the 52?
Of what you have here?
Well, I can answer that. That's going to be a matter for ministers and whether it's affordable.
But if some drop out, of course.
Well, if some drop out, what we would do is, as we've said earlier, go back to the steering group and say this particular project is not viable. We would propose we go to the next one on your list of priorities.
Okay.
Are you content with that?
Okay.
Okay. Alex Maskey again wants to.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points of it. I just do think at this point in time that there's a bit of frustration, I have to say, and I just think it is important to put on the record again, certainly from where we're sitting. This has been a very difficult project and process for some time, and I think officials have been extremely hard-working and officials in doing their job. I commend you all for that. It's been not without its difficulties from the start. There's political difficulties around. We've had all sorts of slurs on the programme, from the slush fund that was described as, or sectarian carve-up was described as, and people have been pulled every which way possible. And in every single area you could talk about, there would be several competing demands. There's no question about that. And I know a number of organisations which haven't came through in this particular round, and they're all very disappointed. At the same token, I think there's a two-way process in this, because the steering groups actually set the priorities, and they're very representative. That's the nature of it. I think we've heard disgraceful criticism around, so much money spent on consultancy money, but all that money was all spent to support the steering groups. I haven't heard too many members. In fact, we have a steering group member here, Chris, Deputy Chair, who's querying you about what's the criteria for funding. Well, if you don't know, why are you on the steering group and why are you deciding on priorities? And I think it's disingenuous to sit in a room and ask questions like that, and actually you're on the panel deciding the priorities, but not coming out and prepared to defend the process thus far and to commend yourselves for what you're doing and take responsibility for the decisions that you have taken. I mean that for all of the steering groups, because I know it's not easy for a number of people in some of the steering groups to basically say in their own community, actually I'm part of this process, and have to take responsibility for it. I just think it's important, and to be throwing out notions that officials might have adopted a suck it and see approach, I just don't think it merits really justification, given the backdrop against which the officials have had to work. And you have came here and you've given briefings when you've been able to. At times you've had to sit there and basically say, I can't tell you anymore, because you didn't have the political authority to do it. So I only want to put on the record, I think it has been a difficult process for the officials here to front up and to come here and explain themselves, and rightly so, take on board robust questions and challenges. But I also think it's important for people, when there is a good news story for communities out there, that actually is acknowledged. And if people are on steering panels, they should declare that, and they should actually take responsibility for the decisions they've taken. And I accept entirely that it's actually impossible to say in the long run, from this point, how all these programmes will benefit those communities. We all hope that they do. But remember this, we had millions of pounds spent in previous incarnations of programme executive funds, and some of them you couldn't even remember what they were spent on. But they were spent with good intentions.
Go and look at the cancer unit.
They were spent on good intentions, and my ministerial colleagues were on the executive at the time taking those decisions. So I'm not taking the issue. Sorry, Chairman, let me finish. I'm not taking the issue with any project that was done. What I'm simply saying is that people around within this assembly, across all of the parties, have taken tough decisions in the past. They haven't all been right, but they've taken decisions. There's been a lot of money spent. They haven't always perhaps worked out the way in which we had hoped. And the same thing could go with this programme. And all I'm saying is that there are people in this assembly who have been prepared to make criticisms, which may well be fair enough. But I think it's important that also people who are taking these decisions, like all members of steering panels, should actually be man enough to say, actually, I'm part of that process, and we take responsibility for our decisions.
The point is made, and I don't think anybody in this committee would disagree with the notion that it is a particular department which poses specific challenges.
But they're producing the goods.
Okay, thank you. Does the Deputy Chair wish
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile, Chair. The role of I thought I had declared interest. I felt like officials had interacted with me in a fairly constructive manner there, in line with the statutory responsibility I have to scrutinise the work of the department. And you can maybe supplement my contribution if necessary. But the role of the steering group is to consult local communities, to identify priorities and to work up proposals with the assistance of appointed experts, consultants. We have no role whatsoever in terms of the criteria on which awards are made, or indeed with making awards. The role of this committee is absolutely to scrutinise that type of process.
Let Chris finish, please.
So, that's the role of the department, which therefore I think it's acceptable for the members of this committee to ask questions about. In terms of any other type of scrutiny, I think it's in line with responsibilities. I said at the outset as well, Chair, that of course investment in projects to tackle dereliction and deprivation are to be welcomed, but I think also most right-thinking people would accept that 3 years into a spending period without any funds spent on project delivery at this stage it's a legitimate question to ask as a member of a statutory committee.
Okay. And Alex, briefly.
I'm not taking issue with that aspect of it, but how and under God can a member of a steering panel sit here and say that it wasn't for them to know what the criteria was? Well, how did you judge and prioritise the projects?
We attended a few meetings, but
I think. So one last thing, I didn't say that. I didn't say I didn't know what the criteria was. I said no. I said it was not my. It's not my responsibility to set the criteria.
Okay.
Or to make the award.
Everybody's had the opportunity there, and I think if we're going to have a discussion, we should let the officials go. Yeah. So thank you very much for coming today, and obviously we look forward to further engagement as the rest of the money is welcomed onto the ground. Joe, Ricky, Lawrence, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Well done.
Right, members, the next item should not provoke any disagreement amongst us. It is a briefing on goods, facilities and services and age discrimination, and it shouldn't provoke any comment because it's not going to happen. So we go on to item 10, which is a draft statutory rule in relation to the salaries, Assembly Ombudsman and Commissioner for Complaints, Order NI 2014. Page 110 of your packs is a copy of the clerk's brief and copies of correspondence from the department and the draft statutory rule. It's subject to negative resolution. The rule will provide for an increase in the annual salary to Dr. Tom Frawley, who is the Assembly Ombudsman for Northern Ireland and the Northern Ireland Commissioner for Complaints. The last salary increase awarded to the Ombudsman was in April 2009, and the current proposal will increase his salary from £128,296 to £129,579, and would come into operation with an effective date of the 1st of April of last year. So it's an increase of some £1,300.
What percent is that? What percentage?
As a percentage,
Actually, below
1%. I mean, there is a question. 13. It's about £100 a month. You could question whether you would actually notice after tax. But I don't think that is the point.
I had a to discuss, Chair.
No, I don't.
In relation or
Helps a pension.
The Ombudsman's salary in any way.
I'm not demeaning.
Or for you to do that.
I'm not demeaning. I certainly don't intend that.
No.
So, any further comments?
Sir, we have been asked to approve this. Is that the procedure, or is this information?
It's just a draft at this stage, and I think it's more, have we got any objections at this stage?
Sorry, I mean, in relation to the NIPSO bill discussions, I mean, why do we need to deal with this at this moment in time if we're actually going to produce legislation?
Well, it's backdated, and it has to be addressed.
Backdated to 2009?
No.
13.
April 13, 1st of April 13. This is entirely separate from any pay.
I know, but we're dealing with NIPSO,
yes,
if you know what I mean. And so this is not going to pertain for that much longer, one would expect.
No, but then, you know, the person in question, as I understand it, is going to retire and has made that public. Yeah. So it doesn't affect the NIPSO or indeed this individual. Does anybody particularly object to?
I don't think it's necessary. I mean, it's a good salary scale as it is. I don't think it's actually necessary. I don't want to be sounding mean either, because it's a relatively small amount.
You get 5 MLAs for that
on that basis. It is quite a good salary as it stands.
Oh yeah, well,
I think Tom Frawley would be quibbling over it myself now, somehow or other. But just think the message.
I think Alex is right. There's a principle here, and the principle is that the bigger principle is that there is a very significant paying conditions that attaches to this job. The lesser principle is that we should be increasing it. So in those circumstances, in the current circumstances, I don't think we should be saying yes to this.
I suppose the alternative argument is, are we signalling and picking out one individual at that kind of pay band? And what about, for example, chief executives of education and library boards, health trusts, other arm's length bodies who would be earning 6-figure salaries and are maybe getting 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%? Do we know? And is it fair to?
It's not. That's why. It's very hard to divorce the particular from the general, but the point I'm making is a general point. I don't think we should be approving wage increases when there is very significant public money's been paid to individuals from the public purse.
I get that, Alex. So, but I would be comfortable then if we were proposing, say, to write to OFMdFM and say, could you raise this as an executive issue? Should people in that kind of pay band generally be receiving anything?
Okay, so I'm prepared to support that proposal, but suspend any judgment on this particular proposal.
Is that the will of the committee?
Is it not the case that was a 1% across the board? Where did that come in? Did that come into all staff?
Worth checking.
No, and I think that's something that needs to be checked. And I'm a bit uncomfortable that this matter's been dealt with. It should be in committee. I mean, usually
in camera
pay issues are in committee. You know, in local government and everything else in relation to, and particularly whenever it's one individual concerned here. I think I have some concerns around that. But I mean, I don't object to it going back and some questions being asked about it. It may well be that there's no alternative at the end of the day because of whatever agreements are in place. But there has been, I think it would be worth asking the question, there has been some increases across the board as far as I'm aware, 1%.
People are entitled to their pay band increases, so their increments.
Okay.
And the pay increase was for those below 23,000, I think.
There was a 1% across the board in terms of.
So could I suggest we go and check, see if there's a 1% and bring it back?
I mean, I think we should just defer it. And I do think we should put the general question to the OFMdFM. Is it worthwhile them contacting all the other departments about?
Yeah, well, let's get some clarity for people who are in that kind of bracket. Item 11, members, is draft terms of reference and an inquiry plan for our proposal for an inquiry into the Barroso Task Force, something we agreed to on the 29th of January. Page 116 has the clerk's brief, which gives you the background and, importantly, the draft terms of reference and the proposed plan. The proposed terms of reference will be threefold. Consider the work and structures of the task force, including the Barroso Task Force Working Group since its inception in 2007. Secondly, identify the outcomes from the task force and assess against the objectives. And thirdly, identify and consider lessons learned from the functioning of the task force in order to inform recommendations for future engagement in EU affairs post-Barroso. Pause for comment. Otherwise, I will be asking if we're content to agree.
Agreed.
Agreed? Thank you very much. So we're content to proceed with inquiry as highlighted in the plan. I will therefore write to the ministers to advise them of our proposed inquiry. Are members content we also write to the suggested stakeholders? Obviously we're trying, that's 117 in your pack under 5.5 evidence. I think it's representative without becoming so broad that it becomes a beast. So we're content? Thank you. Then draft forward work programme, page 120 of your packs. Following last week's briefing, members, on the regeneration of former sites, Crumlin Road has indicated they'd be happy to facilitate a committee meeting or visit, including a tour of the site areas which are as yet underdeveloped, and I think this is FOC.
Chairperson's pleasure, is it?
Do we have to declare that, Chair? Is that a gratuity?
Well, I mean, it was just unfortunate that, you know, I thought it would be a good place to have a meeting, and it turned out it was actually quite expensive for what it was. So what do you think? Do we want to? I mean, there was a specific reason for going offside off the estate, because that was for our strategic planning meeting.
Certainly get terrific travel in this committee, don't you, really? Exciting places.
Jails.
Belfast as far as we get.
Is there, okay, is there an appetite to hold a meeting at the jail?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice place. Yeah.
I've been.
That's okay.
Thoughts?
Coffee shop, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Office good.
Bad coffee, apparently.
Yes, no?
Yes.
Just sorry, just George, the other.
Is this a Wednesday afternoon meeting?
We can have
Not a rotational meeting?
No, no. It would be Wednesday afternoon. Enthusiasm is pouring. Okay. We'll think about it. Okay. Any other business?
Chair, I have one issue, and it's just, you can take this as a criticism if you like. I don't care what way you take it, really. But at the start of the meeting, in relation to the discussion with the head of the civil service, I mean, you read out a long list of 4 pages, I think it is. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, four pages. You know, we have those papers in our packs, and we're all capable of reading. We don't need the headmaster to read them out to us.
I read out 2 pages.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, you read out most of it. So I'm just making a point. And it's not done in other committees. You were obviously on your soapbox again.
I was reading it into the record for the avoidance of doubt. And
yeah, on your soapbox.
And make no apology for so doing.
We're not children around the table. We can read.
Your colleague referred to people in the chamber as children last week.
I'm referring to myself. I'm not a child. I can read, Alex.
I know, but I'm just pointing out that your own
maybe you
colleague,
listen to
minister,
what I'm saying.
Finance Minister, referred to other people in the chamber as children.
Maybe you're listening to what I'm saying. I didn't refer to the chair as a child. I referred to treating us like children around the table. So don't be trying to make a point out of something that's not there.
Just be careful about what you wish for.
Yeah. Well,
I would have been clear. I was reading it into the record.
I'm only making a point.
Yes.
You know, it prolongs meetings.
Chair, can I, just in relation to from a slightly different angle, express gratitude for the work of the officials in compiling the list. It's a helpful aid in quantifying the scale of difficulty that we've experienced in relation to some of the papers and briefings. So, from us, Jimmy is entitled to make the point that he's made, but I just want to.
Absolutely.
It's a
But
useful
we will have an
document.
opportunity, Chris, next week or the week after, whatever week it is, of asking questions on it. I have no issue with that. But I'm just raising the fact that it has to be read out to us.
It's good to have it in the record, though.
That's good to
It's
have.
on the record anyway, because the papers are available to anybody who wants to look at them.
Yeah, I think it's good to have a discussion and of divergent views and these issues.
Don't be offended, Chairman. I know you're never offended at anything I say to you.
Oh, incessantly, but it's 4:30, and I'm sure. Shall I call the meeting to a close there? See you next week.
30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly